And thank you very much for joining us. I am Yori Folari. Everybody is concerned about the electricity subsidy that is said to now be removed, or they are in quite advanced stages towards its removal. Announcements have been made, and we're hearing figures like a 300% increase. In fact, that's our caption today. Federal government increases electricity tariff by 300%. I don't know how that affects you. In fact, we have been told that, don't get it twisted. It won't affect everybody. Only those in Class A will be affected. And then the percentages of those are such that we'll hear about presently. Let me introduce our guest, Mr. Adetayo Adegbemle. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Power Up Nigeria. He joins us from our Abuja studio. A fine morning to you, Mr. Adegbemle.
Uncle Yori, good morning, sir.
Thank you very much for making the time for us, sir. Now,
it's always a pleasure, sir.
Indeed. Thank you very much. The pleasure is always ours. Let me first of all take your perspective on this, because so many people, I don't think they are from within the industry, said when this news first broke that federal government was considering removing the subsidy on electricity, that, what do you mean subsidy on electricity? Is that being subsidized too? That was the first reaction I got. So let's talk about that first, please. Are you also familiar with that sentiment from ordinary folk?
Absolutely, yes. I've heard a lot of things. In fact, all these developments, and I've had feedbacks. I've heard people talking. But you see, like I was in a private conversation yesterday evening, and something struck me. A colleague of mine said something, and something struck me. And it is also a possibility that we are not doing enough in the power sector to educate Nigerians. There is that possibility. The other possibility, in this instance, is that many Nigerians have not been conscious of what is happening, in the sector.
That's right.
The only thing they are used to, or they talk about, is, I don't have light. I was talking to somebody this morning. The person said, since they implemented the tariff change, that he has not had up to 6 hours of power supply. And I said, have you tried to find out whether it is a local fault or a bigger fault? And the person kept saying he doesn't have to. I was saying, okay, he said he didn't tell him. I said, who would have told you if you didn't ask? So there is a very big knowledge gap out there. So when we started talking about tariff, subsidy on electricity tariff, it came as a shock to a lot of people. Like, okay, how is that done? But this is something that the federal government has been carrying for a long time. And it's kept on because it was sustainable. But the last administration under President Buhari, were the ones that came out publicly to say, hey, we cannot continue to pay this tariff. So as at the introduction of the service-based tariff of 2020, September 2020, that was when it was introduced that we are going to have a phased down removal of the subsidy tariff. And by December 2022 tariff review, that's what we had for January, February. In fact, that's what we have until now, basically until thought that this was changed. As at that December 2022 tariff review, a lot of the subsidy has been removed as at then. In fact, I think for people living under Ikeja Band A, for instance, the variance between the actual cost and the tariff that they are being paid, they are allowed to pay, was about maybe 3 or 4 naira. And in places, I think the bigger places were places like Yola, where the difference between the actual tariff and the true cost of electricity and the allowed tariff, which they are allowed to take from them, was about maybe 70-something naira. But as at that December 2022 MITO order, we have started easing off this subsidy. Unfortunately, we had a change of government, or is it fortunately? But interestingly, maybe interestingly will be better. We had a change of government, and of course, the consequent actions of removing fuel subsidy, removing harmonizing the forex window, led to a lot of blowback from the economy. So naturally, the government vetoed, the next tariff review that was supposed to happen in August, September 2023, and froze tariff reviews. Unfortunately, all the factors that the electricity tariff is dependent on, it didn't stay stagnant. We had things like dollar rates, foreign exchange in dollars. Our gencos, they buy gas in dollars. So it's a bit difficult for them to continue to charge the same rate once the dollar skyrocketed. We had other factors like inflation rates. All those things plays a very, very key role in determining, the electricity tariff. Now, what that means is that because there was a freeze on tariff review, and all these other macroeconomic indices came into play, the cost of electricity kind of went off every other thing. The same way our bread became expensive, the same way our gas for domestic consumption became expensive, the same way fuel became expensive, the cost of electricity also became expensive. Because there was a freeze on that review, Nigerians were able to absorb, don't say Nigerians, but Nigerians were supposed to absorb it a bit while the government pays on the large gap of the subsidy that also now came into play. So that has been the story of the subsidy that we had until, it became almost impracticable. Because what now happens is that the sector became so illiquid that we cannot pay for gas. And over 80% of our power generation in Nigeria is gas dependent. They're all thermal, plants that use gas to heat up boil water, to steam, to drive their turbines and give us generate electricity. So gas, the gencos were not able to pay gas suppliers. Gas suppliers were not able to supply gas further. That was one of the things that caused almost near total crash of the grid since January. That's what led to the poor power supply that we experienced immediately after Christmas and New Year. Everything just went down. That was what was responsible for it. And those that are also familiar with the industry will also know that the minister also recently spoke about a debt of about 4.3 trillion naira, to the gas suppliers and to the gencos that needed to be paid. Well, he has promised to offset that debt this month. How he's going to raise the money? Well, that's the conversation that he needs to. But what I would love us to speak to is, the argument that surrounds the present tariff review. But those are the backgrounds that leads us to that point where we say, if we don't do something today, we will continue, to be in deeper depths, in deeper problem, and we'll dig in deeper hole for ourselves in the nearest future.
Indeed. And thank you very much for that bird's eye view of it. And at the top, when we were, sort of chit-chatting, you had said that, you also had heard all sorts of stories indicating that people weren't knowledgeable about the intricacies of everybody just throwing a switch at home. Absolutely. And light coming on. Most people weren't. And you said that you had asked them, look, have you tried to find out if this is a local fault or a systemic fault? And people say, I don't know, I don't care, I'm not supposed to find out. I just need light. Now, I'm recalling this because
to be fair,
you must have heard in the news that there's also the issue of our own habits as consumers. University College Ibadan, yes, the world-famous UCH, had its power cut because you are owing us almost half a billion naira in NEPA, in electricity,
yes,
in
electricity bills, yes.
In electricity
yes.
bills. Half 1 billion. Now, that might also factor into this whole matter. How does an organization, private or corporate, end up owing the electricity company 500 million naira? No doubt that's also part of it. Now, let me tell you, because going back to that first point I made about you saying to some people that, have you tried to find out what kind of a fault you have? This notice was put out yesterday that I have here, and dear esteemed customer, purportedly coming from, let me see now, purportedly coming from, yep, that's it, Ikeja Electric PLC. And it reads, dear esteemed customer, the current service disruption you are experiencing is as a result of significant load restrictions across many of our transmission load centers, particularly impacting, and then they list a whole series of places: Oworo, Maryland, Itire, Solo, Ogba, Alausa, Ejigbo, and we apologize for any inconvenience caused. We are actively collaborating with relevant stakeholders to restore normal operations. Signed, management. This goes back to the point that you made. Say, where is the problem coming from? Is it a local one or is it a systemic one? And so now that we have the situation that we are in now, okay, they've just put a screen up of prices, but I don't want that to distract me. I just wanted to say, what does this explain? That notice that I read out, what does this explain really as part of the problem that we're contending with?
All right. Okay, if you don't mind, right?
Yes.
I understand the question you are asking, but I believe there are also other foundations that we need to lay to this conversation.
Sure, please.
And it also speaks to the knowledge gap that we are talking about. For instance, I don't know where your house is, don't tell me, but do you know what band you are on?
Hey, that goes back to the band A business. That band A, band B.
Good. Now, a lot of consumers, and to be fair, let me state it up front, to be very fair, consumers don't have business, knowing some things. But I believe that a lot of things they need to know. They don't have business knowing that a fault happens somewhere or that the national grid collapsed. They don't have any business. What they have business with is to switch on and off their lights. That's what they have business with. Quite all right. Yes. But it is unfortunate that we are in this situation together, and having a better understanding of the situation that we are in. I think it is not just the work of the experts or some few interested people. It is the work of everybody involved. For instance, when they say there is a tariff review, have you gone to ask, what band am I? What constitutes a band? Now, initially, pre-2020 tariff review, we had a different ratings or band groupings for consumers. We used to have commercial, C1, C2, C3. We used to have residentials, R1, R2, R3. We used to have those on life support. We used to have I think R1 is the one on life support. So they are like the very poor people that use less than 50 kilowatts hour in a month, that kind of thing. Right. Then we have the residentials, we have the R2, R3, we have the commercials, So, if you look at your bill, you can see, I am R2 something customer. To tell you straight up where you're falling. Now, that was the initial groupings that we had of customers. But then, moving fast forward, of course, the regulators sat down and said, okay, I think they think it's going to be better for a different kind of groupings. So they now said, okay, let's look at the quality of or the number of hours of supply that you receive, to determine your pricing. This is why. Of course, there was subsidy too then, but then because of development, right? The kind of development that we see in a place like Ikeja is not the kind of development that we see in a place like Magboro, for instance, for those that live on that axis. For those of us that lives in Abuja, it's not the kind of development that you have in Abuja main town. It's the same kind of development that you have in a place like Gwagwalada or Abaji. You understand? So
Indeed.
if an R2 customer in Maitama is paying the same tariff as an R2 customer in Abaji, the system looked at it as unfair. So they said, instead of us going through this route, why don't you let us look at the hours of supply? Now, for a number of reasons, because of the kind of infrastructure that is already, has been invested on in a place like Ikeja, in a place like even the main city of Ikorodu. When you now start going to all those Berigbe, all those they are satellite cities of Ikorodu, they also have another level of development that is not as high as the main city. So they are saying there is more capacity they are able to deliver to such developed areas. They've already funded the project. So what I believe the argument then, which they gave us, was that let's look at how to give such highly developed areas more power supplies, then charge them based on the number of hours of supply that they can receive. Instead of putting everybody on the same blanket and everybody does not get the same result, So they design bands. So they look at feeders that can do 24 hours power supply and they put them in band A. They look at feeders that can do between, 16 and 20 hours of power supply. They put them on band B. Like that. They graduated it down. So those on band A's that can receive between 20 and 24 hours of power supply, if you look at the demography of the people of the places we are talking about, we're talking about the eyebrow areas majorly. We are talking about the state capitals, we're talking about the developed areas of the state capitals, we're talking about the high income earning areas of the country. So they band those places into high income areas. So into high service areas. That's why we come about with the band A's. Then, of course, they graduated it down like that. And they said, if you live in such an area, apparently you don't belong to people like us that live in a place where the development has not reached. You are not, where to deliver energy, it costs more. And, of course, the infrastructure to even take such energy is not there yet. So those that are living in those areas, they decided to prioritize, let me quote it, prioritize them because they have the facility to take such energy up. Now, that is the foundation for the banding that we have today. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't even bother to know, how the banding, how it affects us as individuals, how it affects our immediate environment. Mm-hmm. What we know is we've not been given light, we've been given light. Again, I cannot blame consumers for that, but because that should be their primary objective. But we are living in uncertain times. We are living in an unusual environment. So it should be our interest to know all these things.
Let me just come in very briefly there. This banding, you've explained it, and I think whether we like it or not, people have begun to understand it by force and by fire. Be that to one side. The minimum of 20 hours per day, as it concerns band A, kind of consumers or subscribers or whatever the proper name is, you can't even guarantee that. The system doesn't deliver, according to those who are there, a minimum of 20 hours, to them. This might.
All right.
You will know why this is. Yes, please, again, your comment.
I want to implore a lot of us to get more interested in this conversation. It is when we get such needed knowledge that we can, and we are better informed, that we can better challenge the system. We can be involved in decision taking. Now, I was privileged to be at the press conference that the regulators called on Tuesday. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? On Wednesday. That was on 3rd, right? I was there. And when the vice chairman was speaking, part of the thing he said was, all right, that they reach out to the discos to give them feeders that are on band A. And that they gave them the feeders. but they went to do their own independent audit. So according to the regulators, they have smart meters installed at all these feeders already that monitors the hours of power supplies to such feeders. Now, unfortunately, I would have loved to use an infograph to, like a pictorial this thing, but engineers understand engineers understand the breakdown. When we say feeders, feeder level, then we come down to transformer level. Now, if there is light at the feeder level and there is no light at your transformer level, again, that's why I said, have you called to know whether it's your local fault?
Yes.
So we need to understand how the thing cascades down so that we can know at what interval. I mean, if I'm supposed to have, if they said I'm on band A, for instance, and I'm supposed to have light for 20 hours minimum, and I have done my maths, and I've not had light for 12 hours, I think it is also in my right, as somebody that is being charged that amount of money to challenge. I mean, because it's a contract. So part of the things that the regulators have said they have put in place now is those smart meters monitoring, those feeders. Yeah. So what it means is that if your feeder does not give you 20 hours minimum and you have been charged on that feeder, you can challenge it. And the regulators too will have, they have their own data to confirm that this has been challenged. That is one. Okay. Two, I also understand that.
One second, please. If you could please hold your thought where it is. Mr. Olaniro has called in from Ijushaga, and we've been holding on to him for a while you were explaining. Good morning, Mr. Olaniro. Good morning to you, Mr. Olaniro.
Good morning. My name is Olaniro from Ijushaga. So I've been listening to what your guest has been saying. Are you there?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I've been listening to what your guest has been saying, and though it's making sense, but I believe there is something that is missing now. I cannot be providing the service, to my customers, and when necessary, I need to dish out information about the challenges that the company is having, or what the required information the customers are meant to have. And I'll be expecting for them to ask before I dish out those information. That is bad, because DISCOs, if they want to get their revenue, they know how to get to all of these places that are not even metered to get estimated bills. According to them, how many of all of these Yalata and Yalewedo and Yalamala who are using can be able to understand this is band A, this is band B? How many times have they been able to sensitize them that this is the amount of required, hours that you are meant to have in this area? That is one. Then two is that this morning I was listening to a particular guest on the TV station, Mr. Bonga, who was talking about all of these regulations and all of these regulations that the Met are given to the DISCOs, but they are not abiding by all of these things.
Okay, I take your point. Thank you very much, Mr. Olaniro. Indeed, appreciate your call. And now this is part of what Mr. Adegbenle is explaining, and it followed from an observation I had made that even the band A, for instance, they don't deliver according to those who are there. Haven't been charged the premium, 225 naira per kilowatt hour, that kind of a thing. So I take the explanation that you are giving, but also the point was made to us that those in band A happen to be consuming up to 40% of what is available of electricity, and that these, what appear like tough, draconian times, will not actually affect other people who are not in band A. That explanation was given. Could you also, touch on that, lest it is felt that everybody is going to be on the 225 naira per kilowatt hour charge?
No. This review only affects the high consumption areas, and these areas are the band A areas.
That's
in
right.
fact, I think they consume over about 60% of our total even generation.
The figure that was given was up to 40%.
Up to 40%. Okay, 40%. I mean, but I believe it is higher because all these areas are the industrial areas. They have, they take the bulk of.
Okay.
Because the loan takes 20% of the generation nationwide already. So, if you are not in band A, this tariff review does not affect you.
In other words,
left to me, I think what is just is the high income areas, the highbrow areas that are primarily affected by this review. And left to me, right, knowing what I know, because I'm going to say this, whether it is the fact as it is on ground. I would rather have a 24 hours power supply, right? I'm paying 2 to 5 per kilowatt hour. By the time you do your calculation of the cost of darkness, the cost of the outage, the cost of running your diesel, or buying your solar panels, by the time you put that cost together, you are going to be paying much higher than even that 2 to 5 on the average. That one is a given.
A lot of people have figured that out, but it's not available to them.
So the desired now, the desired now should be for us to pay for this service and pray that all those other bands that are band Bs are also upgraded as quickly as possible. Now, what does that mean? It also means that we are going to be generating more so that we can supply to bring all those other bands up to band A. So what we are doing basically is a phased development. Areas that are already developed, they're already paying. And the interesting part of it is that those areas are paying as close as possible to the true cost of electricity. And there's also the factor again that we are not considering here, which is that there is cross-subsidy that is involved in this scheme. So those people that are in band A that are paying, the true cost of electricity are a bit higher, depending on the term, are also cross-subsidizing for other people that are not getting enough. So by the time we are able to, what we should be pursuing is for us to be able to bring in more bands, more feeders onto band A.
Okay.
That should be our focus. Now, let me also